Hey everyone, it's been a while since we've done one of these hot topic videos, so let's get into it. All right, so average GTA house prices in August actually increases for the first time since February. Inflation is still stubbornly high, so there's likely going to be more interest rate hikes coming up. And so what does this mean for the housing market? What are we and what are some of our clients doing? Also some big news around policy changes for garden suites in Hamilton that can affect whether or not you can add a second suite or not on your property. And we're going to talk a little bit about the garden suite policy gaining traction in Toronto as well, and a strategy that may be an extremely good return on investment that we're helping many clients with that you may not have considered. So we're going to talk about that. So stick around. We're going to cover all this stuff and more. All right, welcome back. This is Andy from Suite Editions, where we help homeowners and investors create better homes and, of course, generate lasting wealth. All right, so if you don't mind, please take a second to like this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. That really helps us get more content out. Okay, so it's been a couple of months since we've done one of these. I hope everyone's enjoyed their summer and you're all excited to get back into the swing of things. I always consider September to be like the new year. Okay, so I certainly am excited. So let's dive right into it. Okay, so in August, we had a slight uptick in real estate prices. The average GTA house price in August was 1.08 million, which was an increase of roughly 0.5% from July and a 19% decline from the February peak, which is roughly a drop of 254,000 in a matter of 6 months. Year over year, we still had a slight gain of 0.9% from August of 2021, where the average prices were approximately 1.07 million. So as it stands right now, August, September, it's pretty much flat with last year. Now, the interesting thing is that, despite the prices having come down quite significantly in the past 6 months, the number of active listings are significantly down year over year, with around 5,600 listings this past August, compared with approximately 8,500 listings last August. Okay, so I think that's close to a 40% decline in actual inventory. So what's my interpretation of all this? Have we hit a bottom with house prices, given that there's a slight uptake in the market? I personally don't think that there's any evidence to show that we've hit a bottom in the market, especially in light of some of the recent inflation news that has come out recently, which we'll cover in a bit. The interesting thing, however, as we mentioned earlier, is that despite average home prices being down by 250,000, there is still a severe lack of inventory in the market, almost 3,000 less compared with a year ago. Okay, and of course, to me, that is an indication that supply is still a real issue here. Here's a podcast I listened to. I think this was probably a couple months ago, where we had Dr. Mike Moffitt, who's a data scientist analyzing the Ontario population data, sort of looking at all of the trends in terms of the amount of housing units that are coming on board, the immigration levels, how fast houses are getting absorbed. And he's stating in this podcast, and you can actually Google him and you'll find other articles where he discusses this topic of, just a real severe lack of housing that is not going to keep up with the demand and all of the new population in the coming years. Now, it seems like the way I'm looking at it is that many homeowners who are not desperate to sell their homes, they're not doing so, and quite possibly the reason why average prices have come down so much is because there was a small segment of sellers that had to sell, which brought down the entire average significantly. Okay. Not to mention the fact that, really the gains that we saw late last year and earlier this year was really not sustainable. Okay, so what does this mean in the big picture? What am I personally doing, as well as many of my investor clients? Okay, so let's dig into some more data before we discuss that. Okay, so the most recent inflation data here in Canada was from August, which showed 7.0%, which eased slightly from the 7.6% the month prior in July. Now, is this a sign that inflation has peaked, and does it mean that the Bank of Canada is going to pivot and not increase rates anymore? Okay, I personally doubt it, because the more important data is from the U.S., which shows more recently that inflation is still increasing slightly. Okay, So last week, the U.S. announced that the consumer price index, the CPI, came in at 8.3%, 0.1% higher than August, which was 8.2%. Okay, I believe the Bank of Canada will pay very close attention to the Fed response, and of course, they raised interest rates a couple of days ago, and even though Canada has been ahead of the curve in interest rates, they're probably going to follow with some sort of a rate increase, before the year end. Of course, we just saw that the Fed increased rates by another large margin at 75 basis points, 0.75%, which is now the third large rate hike in a row this year. So it appears the market has already priced in a 75 basis point increase. Okay. Now, in the last Federal Reserve meeting, Chairman Jay Powell did suggest that they will be extremely hawkish still, and that a 2% inflation rate is still their target. Okay. So they're doing whatever they can. They're not worried about crashing the economy as long as they're able to bring that inflation rate down. Okay, so we can probably expect that they're going to be very aggressive still, as they still have their eyes set on that 2% target. Here in Canada, even though we've already had our rate hikes for September, the Bank of Canada will certainly pay close attention to what the U.S. Fed is continuing to do. Now, my guess is that there will probably be another 0.5% rate hike by both central banks before the end of the year. And that'll probably be it for a while, as the economy is likely going to go into recession. Okay, and that's not really something that the policymakers have talked a lot about, but we've heard a lot in the news, and there's a lot of companies indicating that. Okay, so what does this mean? Given that real estate prices may have stabilized a bit, inflation is still stubbornly high, and the central banks still hold the sentiment that there will be more rate hikes to tackle inflation. What does this mean for real estate? I'm going to discuss a few other things before I give my opinion. Okay. Now, if you ask the average person what they think about where interest rates are headed, many are going to suggest that interest rates will go much higher in order to bring down inflation. Okay. So some even suggest that it has to hit double digits like they did in the 1980s in order to bring inflation down. And a lot of the mainstream media news outlets are sharing this sentiment as well, although they're not going to be as extreme in their reporting to suggest that interest rates has to go double digits. Now, what they fail to mention is that the financial health of almost every actor in the economy back in the 1980s was much healthier than they are now. We've discussed this before, but the debt levels of everyone, including individuals, households, businesses, and most importantly, the government themselves, are incredibly high. Okay, and it may seem logical that the solution is to bring that debt level down, but really, when you look at the big picture, it's impossible to do in the debt-based system that we're living in, where we need continual credit and growth to keep the system running. I'm going to share an article here that talks about how the Treasury yield curve is an indicator of a recession to come. Okay, so it looks more and more likely that we're entering into a recession. So a good indicator of that historically is when short-term bond yields are higher than long-term bond yields. Okay, so this is an article that was put out in September 15th. If you look at the U.S. Treasury market, a 2-year bond is priced in at 3.85% now, while a 30-year Treasury bond provides a yield of less, which is 3.47%. Okay, so this is strange when the short-term bond gives you a higher yield than the long-term bond. Okay, so this is the most inverted it's been since the year 2000, and historically this has been a really accurate indicator of a coming recession. Here's an article here's an article about the Federal Express CEO warning that there will be a worldwide recession. Okay, so this is very interesting. Now, because most of the time the information from the government is a lagging indicator, obtaining, and aggregating past data, really resulting in information that's really possibly a couple months old. For example, in Canada here, we just received the inflation numbers for August. However, with a company like FedEx, they're seeing real-time actual figures on the ground, and they would probably have more of a pulse on overall economic activity, right? Because they deliver packages from all different types of sectors of the economy, compared to what the government's looking at, compared to other more niche companies. Okay, so this is definitely a very interesting article when the CEO says that they're potentially from what they can see from the data, we're entering into a worldwide recession, in quotes. Okay. At some point, I believe in the near future, the rates will be raised to a point where it's going to cause a deep recession, and they will be forced to pivot very quickly and potentially lower rates again. Okay. But who knows? This is just my guess looking at the articles here. It's very hard to say what's going to happen in the short term, such as in the next 6 months to say a year and a half. But I do feel that in the long term, 2 years and beyond, there needs to be more stimulus, more spending by everyone, with the government themselves leading the charge with more fiscal expenditures. Okay, the policymakers, I feel, have the ability to affect the market in the short term, but not in the long term. Okay, in the 80s, we needed double-digit interest rates in order to bring down double-digit inflation. However, we don't really need that level of interest rate hikes these days to bring the inflation down because the debt levels are so high. Okay, so one number that you can look at is that in the 80s, the debt to GDP of both the economies in the US and Canada was like 30-40%, whereas right now it's over 100%. So we just really need more debt. Okay, and speaking of that, this is one of my favorite websites to look at. This is the Canadian debt clock. Here we can see the total public debt 40 years ago was 86 billion. Now it's 14 times higher at just under 1.2 trillion. Okay, quite simply, we're just all addicted to more and more debt. And if you look at the U.S. debt clock, that one's I think I just saw that was sitting at almost 31 trillion right now. Okay, so in 2008, after the financial crisis, I believe it was around 8 or 9 trillion. So now it's already more than tripled. So what is it going to be? What is it going to be like in the next 10 or 12 years? After saying all this, how does this translate to the real estate market, and what does this mean going forward? You're probably wondering if it's a good idea to buy, sell, or hold real estate. The only thing I can do is give you my opinion and what I'm doing. It may not be right, but it's my best guess looking at the data. Now, do I believe that we've hit a bottom in the market? I personally don't think so. I think there's more pain to come and likely even lower overall prices, because it's clear that some additional rate hikes and more people won't be able to qualify for mortgages, and some may be forced to sell. At the same time, I also think it's an opportunity right now if I'm able to find a good property where I can force appreciation to it. So I've talked a lot about that in the past. Of course, cosmetic improvements, adding in second suites, garden suites, and potentially doing small scale development. We don't at this point have to compete with a dozen other offers, and we're even able to put conditions on the offer. Okay. Ultimately, it's very hard to time the exact bottom of a market. One additional thing I'm looking at is the comparison of the commodity value of a property and the sale price. Okay, a lot of people say that if houses are an inflation hedge, then why are prices coming down? Okay, well, the short answer is that because real estate is a leveraged asset, you're not buying it with cash. So in a loose credit environment, it's probably going to overshoot, which is of course what happened late last year, earlier this year. Once credit tightens in an inflationary environment, prices will come down, but probably not lower than the commodity value of a property. Okay, so for example, right now I have clients that are purchasing homes for just under $500,000. Now, if I had a parcel of land that was given to me for free, I'm not even sure if I can build a full house for $500,000 these days with material and labor costs where they are. Okay. It's costing me almost $300,000 just to build a 600 square foot garden suite. So unless you believe that wages and building materials are going to drop significantly, I just personally can't see prices going down that much farther. But again, I can be wrong here. That's kind of just what I see. Right now, I'm in the market looking for a property with several joint venture partners, and we're hoping to acquire at least 2 properties for the remainder of the year. Of course, this is not investment advice, guys. Please do your own due diligence. Figure out what works best for your specific circumstances. Okay, I'm going to switch gears now and get into a bit of housing policy and provide some updates on garden suite bylaws. But I just want to end this discussion with this piece of news here and headline. This was from last week. Okay, Canada's Trudeau announces $4.5 billion in inflation relief package for low earners. Okay, can you see the irony in this headline? Okay, so they're going to provide $4.5 billion to help low-income earners tackle inflation. All right, now if you can't see the irony, it's because this $4.5 billion needs to be printed and borrowed to be made available, and ultimately this is just going to cause more inflation. Okay, so this really is a perfect illustration of what we have discussed up till now. Expect that this kind of thing will continue, maybe not for the next 6 months to a year, maybe even 2 years, but ultimately this kind of stuff is going to continue because this is really the only thing that they know how to do. Okay, at the end of the day, there is no free lunch. People have to work to make money. You can't print money on your way to prosperity. All right, okay, so let's talk a little bit about housing policy and some of the things that we're seeing. Okay, so this was an older article from CBC. This was actually back in June. Talks about how Ontario needs 1.85 million additional homes to achieve affordability by 2030. So this is the report saying that they need 1.85 million. Their target is 1.5 million. Okay, so it's less than this 1.85 million. And the current pace before the rates tightening was half of that, which was around 750,000 homes as a target by 2030. Okay, that was kind of the pace. Now, given rates tightening, we're going to get into that in a little bit, but that actually has resulted in many projects being canceled. So we're even lower than the pace that was happening, which was, half the pace of what was required, for not what was required, but what was the target from the provincial government. Okay, so there's just not enough construction happening. That's the bottom line. This is kind of what this article shows. By the way, I'm going to include the links to all of these articles here on the in the comment section, in the description below, and feel free to browse these articles and look through them in detail. Of course, with the difficulties in getting mortgages, rents are going sky high. On this website, rentals.ca, here's a look at all the markets in Canada and what rents have gone to. So in Toronto, 17.1%. I'm just going to look at some numbers here in Ontario. North York, 18.5%. Kitchener, 11%. Hamilton, 15%. So definitely, what's 20? Wow, Calgary, 29.8%. Wow, okay. Yeah, so this is what we're seeing, of course, right? People aren't able to purchase, so this is what's rent is going to be at, in order for people to get into some sort of a housing unit, right? They're probably not even going to be able to get into, many are not going to be able to get into a single family home. A lot of them are going to be apartments. A lot of them are going to be additional suites, like the kind of stuff that we put out there. All right, here's an article from CP24. This was back in August 23rd. Tory announces 5-point plan to build homes faster and tackle affordability in Toronto. Okay, sounds very promising. Tory's plan consists of 5 pillars. Expanding housing options by permitting missing middle housing. Excellent. Okay, that's part of the expanding housing options program in Toronto. Okay, cutting red tape and speeding up approval times by creating a development and growth division. Asking the province to allow the city to enact a asking the province to allow the city to enact a use it or lose it policy for developers sitting on approved but undeveloped land. Okay, now why are they not developing it and they're just sitting on land that has already been approved? Maybe it's because they can't get the financing that's necessary to build. Allocating a portion of city-owned land to be developed by nonprofits. Incentivizing the construction of purpose-built rental housing by reducing fees and charges. Okay, so hopefully some of these policies do get enacted and that they do help with some additional housing. Although, as I understand it, a lot of developers, big and small, are putting their projects on hold. Okay, a little bit about garden suites. Okay, so the last time we put out the video, it was still not fully passed, but it's been completely passed in the last 2 months. We had some neighborhood associations that, some homeowner associations in Toronto that had put in an appeal. That actually got thrown out before it reached the Ontario Land Tribunal. So garden suites in Toronto are full on now. We have some projects going, and there's a lot of people that actually have permits already in there. So it's going to be very exciting to see some of this development in the coming months and years. I did put out a specific video on Toronto Garden Suites here. This was the last video that I did. We posted this about a couple weeks ago, and it covers the high level items that you need to look for when you are building garden suites in Toronto. So I do recommend that if you're interested in doing them in Toronto, check out the video. Of course, Toronto makes a lot of sense just because of the land values and how expensive everything is. And then I want to talk a little bit also about a strategy that not that many people have considered. And we actually have a handful of projects right now where we're converting existing detached garages to garden suites, right? Everything from single car garages to 1.5 to 2 car garages that we're able to convert to studio apartments, to 1 bedroom, to even up to 2 bedroom apartments. So, you know, if you have an underutilized existing detached garage, you know, either if it's a property that you have right now in your portfolio, or if you're going out looking at property, keep an eye out on garages that are in good structural condition. I recommend that you read my article that I put together last year on how to convert your garage to an additional suite. And yeah, I think it's definitely a very good opportunity because you already have the structure. You don't have to put in the foundation. Of course, you have to insulate it. You have to bring in all the utilities, but you're going to be able to save a lot by not having to do you know, the structure and the foundation. Okay, so have a look at that article and check out, you know, properties when you're going out there and see if there might be some garages that you can convert. And the last thing I want to discuss is Hamilton. Also, they've changed their bylaws to for most residential zones to allow additional dwelling units, so garden suites and second suites, to not require additional parking. Okay, so if the property existed on you know, before May of 2021, only the parking space that was required for the original house is required. Any additional parking for second suites and garden suites do not require additional parking for many of the residential zones. Okay, so I'm going to put this link as well so you can go through it in detail if you are interested in investing in Hamilton. I know many of you who are watching this are investing in Hamilton or already have property in Hamilton. Okay, so that covers everything I wanted to discuss today. I think I have another little article here. Oh yeah, okay, so the last thing I wanted to just end with is this was from earlier in August. This is just one of the many news articles indicating that a lot of developers have put their projects on pause. So in the GTA indicates that there are 10,000 condo units, I believe that's condo units, that are delayed. And you know, a lot of it has to do with, as it says here, canceling or delaying projects as interest rates and inflation rises, right? Inflation, that's going to cause materials and labor to go up. You know, at the same time, you have interest rates going up, financing's very difficult. So one of the things that I've said for a while now is that really, you know, if you have a loose credit market where, you know, there's a lot of demand for real estate, a lot of people buying real estate, it's going to be unaffordable. You have a tightening environment, you know, a lot of places are not going to get built, right? So that ultimately leads to affordability issues as well. So, you know, as long as we have an environment where it's challenging to build more housing, we're always going to have an affordability issue. We're not going to be able to tweak it with, you know, with policy changes. We just need to essentially make things easier for developers, big and small, to build houses. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. So hope you enjoyed some of the content there. Sorry it was a little bit long-winded. We haven't done this in a couple months. So hopefully we'll be able to get back here next month, and maybe we'll have some new data for you and see where things go. All right, thanks so much for watching. Again, please like this video and subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching our video. We have a brand new garden suite guide, how to add one to your property. You can download a copy right now for free if you go to www.suiteeditions.com. We cover a ton of stuff you need to know if you want to start building these to create more housing and wealth at the same time. There's also a list of resources that we've identified that you can use. Download your copy now for free at www.suiteeditions.com.